the Guardian did a little story on former President Donald Trump, and the headline says January 6th was a coup organized by the president. It says Jamie Raskin. Member of House Capitol Attack Panel says hearings will focus on Trump's bid to cling to power. Donald Trump attempted a coup on January 6, 2021 as he tried to salvage his doomed presidency, and that will be a central focus of forthcoming public hearings of the special House panel investigating events surrounding the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, the Congressman Jamie Raskin has said. Raskin is a prominent Democrat on the committee and also led the House efforts when Trump was impeached for a historic second time in 2021. Accused of inciting the storming of the U.S. Capitol by his extremist supporters who were trying to stop the certification of Joe Biden's victory. This was a coup organized by the president against the vice president and against the Congress in order to overturn the 2020 presidential election, Raskin said in an interview with The Guardian, Reuters' new agency, and the Ep.1 radio program. Public hearings by the bipartisan special committee investigating January 6th and related actions by Trump and his White House team and other allies, chaired by the Mississippi Democrat Benny Thompson, are expected next month. We're going to tell the whole story of everything that happened. There was a violent insurrection and an attempted coup, and we were saved by Mike Pence's refusal to go along with that plan. He was referring to Trump's vice president, who went ahead in his role of overseeing the certification of Biden's win, which was delayed until the early hours of the following day after Pence and other lawmakers, staff, and journalists ended up running for their lives as rioters stormed the building shortly after Trump held a rally near the White House, exhorting his supporters to fight like hell. The November 2020 presidential election was deemed by experts at the local, state, and federal levels to have been the most secure in American history, with Trump's Attorney General Bill Barr also concluding that December that the result was accurate. I don't know what that meant. Raskin told The Guardian that the panel's hearings would demonstrate to the American public the actions that Trump and the cohort who went along with his efforts took to overturn the election. If the attack on the Capitol had succeeded in preventing the certification of Biden as the incoming president, Raskin asserted that Trump was prepared to seize the presidency and likely to invoke the Insurrection Act and declare martial law. The insurrection resulted in death and injury to law enforcement, and Raskin said that in addition to Pence's stance against Trump's demands, the democratic process that day was also saved by the valor and the bravery of our officers who stood against the attempt to just overrun the whole process. After a broad criminal investigation, about 800 people have been charged with crimes committed in relation to the Capitol attack. Raskin said, "We don't have a lot of experience with coups in our own country, and we think of a coup as something that takes place against a president. However, January 6th was not what typically regarded as a coup because it did not involve the military or another faction. It's what the political scientists call a self-coup. It's the president fearful of defeat overthrowing the constitutional process. The Maryland congressman is also looking at the bigger, interrelated picture of American democracy and the climate crisis." Okay. "We gotta save the democracy in order to save the climate and save our species. Extremist groups were part of the insurrection and have been an outsized, renewed influence on political and social division in the U.S. in recent years." Raskin said, "We're never going to be able to successfully deal with climate change if we're spending all of our time fighting the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and Ku Klux Klan and the Aryan Nations and all of Steve Bannon's alt-right nonsense." So, I have a few things to say. One, I love how The Guardian is making Mike Pence to look like a celebrity when Mike Pence is a douchebag. Mike Pence is anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-black, anti-worker, anti-free speech, anti-separation of church and state. He's basically everything that you could think of in a take everything bad and put it into Mike Pence, and you have that. And when he was governor of Indiana, jobs were scarce and people were not happy. But there was no prominent Democrat that could take out. It's Mike fucking Pence. How do you not beat Mike Pence? Anyway, so the second point that the Guardian, or that the writer of this article made, is just something that's just simply not true. even if the rioters had taken over, right? Biden's victory was actually certified already. It was just a formal process. They interrupted the formal process of, the next president kind of having a peaceful transition of power. They interrupted that process. That was what happened, because Biden was he was the president elect. Like, there was nothing that they could have done to stop the fact that Biden was going to become president. There was nothing that could have happened. It was already a foregone conclusion by that point that Biden was going to be president. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So, for the Guardian to make it out like Mike Pence saved this, country from another 4 years of Trump, that's just bullshit. Like that's just flat out not true. Because there was nothing that Trump could have done, and there was nothing that MAGA could have done to stop Biden from becoming president, unless Trump just became a full dictator and just declared martial law, which would have been fought, and he might have been president for a few more weeks, but Biden would have taken over still at some point. So, that would be the doomsday. That would have been the Hail Mary doomsday type of a scenario for Donald Trump, but he would have only clinged on to power for a few more weeks anyway. And so, I think he's not going to get in trouble for this, Trump, because even though he clearly violated the Constitution, if you watch the videos from that day, he saved himself by speaking out of both sides of his mouth. He was for what they were doing, but then when people were outraged over what was happening, he said, that you need to go home. We're all thankful. We love you for what you have done, but go home in peace. He saved himself from prosecution in that sense, because he could be in a court of law, he'd be hey, I told them to go home, but they didn't choose to leave. That's not my fault. And I mean, a jury would probably look at that and say, he's got a fucking point. And so that's where I feel should he get in trouble? Yes. Should he go to prison? Yes. Should he never be allowed to hold the office of president again? For sure. But the fact is that because he spoke out of both sides of his mouth, he saved himself. And so, the article also mentioned the fact that, Mike Pence, the writer of the article commented about the bravery of the officers on that day. And there are people that I know within my circle who are MAGA people, and even they were what MAGA did to those cops was just not cool. And I've seen some people who are defending Trump and all that stuff say that those were not cops that died. They were just dressed in cop outfits. Dude, shut the fuck up. And Trump has never came out and said on that day, we lost 3 great officers. He never talked about how we lost police on that day. For a guy who claimed to back the blue, he never once mentioned the officers that died, the ones that are permanently crippled, and the ones who are just getting back onto their feet. He never once mentioned them. Don't you guys notice that? He never mentioned he never mentioned the officers that perished, were injured on January 6th, defending the house that the people built. But those people were duped by him. So it was just a fitting end to a fucking disgrace of a presidency, mixed with a couple of good things that at the end of it all will probably not matter because nothing good that he did will ever, like, materially last. Like, if you think about it in terms of, like, past presidents, they've all done at least, like, one good thing. Except maybe, like, Gerald Ford. But the good things that each president has done has stuck in some way, even, like, decades later. Like, Roosevelt, everything that he passed through, it still has stuck. Everything that JFK did has stuck. Everything that LBJ did has stuck. Everything that Eisenhower did has stuck. So I feel like Trump didn't do anything that materially helped people. People are still before, like, and I've seen people say that, Trump's, economy was ruined before COVID. But let me tell you, 75% of workers in this country were living paycheck to paycheck, making less than $50,000 a year. Okay? 75%, there's 330 million Americans. That's about 210 million people who work 50 to 60 hours a week and just are barely surviving. Okay? You were lied to based off of numbers of the stock market. Okay? And, I mean, look, I don't like dude, but where was the credit from MAGA for the fact that, like, Biden has, like, record-breaking jobs numbers? Like, I've not seen 1 ounce of credit to him for that. Say what you want, but the American Rescue Plan got people working again. Whether you want to admit it or not, that shit worked. And that's going to continue to work for years, okay? So, I feel like MAGA doesn't care about the fact that cops died on that day, but they don't care that the guy that they're going to war for does not give a fuck about them. And the whole January 6th thing to me was just sad because those people don't seem to realize that he doesn't care about them. And he never has, and he never ever will. So, just found that to be a sad but also interesting story.